Have you ever wondered why, in the middle of a noisy party, with loud music, flashing lights, and dozens of people talking around you, you suddenly feel deeply alone? Why, paradoxically, the more people surround you, the greater the feeling of isolation can become? This experience is not only yours, there is something deeply revealing in this phenomenon that we collectively experience but rarely discuss. This contradiction invites us to explore an uncomfortable truth about our contemporary society and about the very nature of human consciousness. Why do some people, especially those with a higher degree of self-awareness, often feel the need to escape large crowds? What does this behavior, often labeled as antisocial or introverted, really tell us about the human condition in the 21st century? Is there a hidden wisdom in this distance that our hyper-connected culture and constant exposure try to suppress? For millennia, human beings lived in small groups. Our minds evolved in communities where we knew each person by name, where we shared stories around campfires, where every interaction had context and meaning. A Paleolithic hunter-gatherer interacted closely with perhaps 150 people throughout his entire life. This is the so-called Dunbar number, the theoretical cognitive limit of people with whom we can maintain stable relationships. Our ancestors rarely experienced the sensation of being surrounded by dozens or hundreds of complete strangers. When that happened, it usually meant danger, a hostile encounter with another tribe, a war situation. Our neurobiology was shaped to interpret anonymous crowds as potentially threatening. This ancestral programming remains in our brain like an old software running on modern hardware. The agricultural revolution, about 12,000 years ago, began to drastically change this scenario, creating villages and eventually cities. The Industrial Revolution accelerated the process, producing metropolises where millions of strangers coexist in physical proximity but emotional distance. And finally, the digital revolution created an even deeper paradox. We are simultaneously more connected than ever through our screens and more disconnected in our physical interactions. We may have thousands of online friends whom we have never met in person, while barely knowing the name of the neighbor who lives next door. This radical transformation in our social structure happened in an evolutionary blink of an eye, leaving our internal psychology out of sync with our external environment. When we enter an environment with dozens or hundreds of people, such as a party or a shopping mall, our brain is flooded with a volume of social data that it was never designed to process. Each unfamiliar face, each fragment of conversation captured, each movement in the periphery of our vision demands cognitive resources. Our attention system, developed to track predators on the savannah or identify edible fruits in the forest, becomes overloaded by the excess of irrelevant stimuli. This sensory overload has a real energy cost for our brain, which consumes about 20% of all our body's energy, despite representing only 2% of our body mass. The people we call conscious are often those with nervous systems that are more sensitive to this overload. It's not that they are antisocial, but rather that their perceptual apparatus registers more inputs from the environment and processes this information more deeply. Psychologist Elaine Aron described this phenomenon as the characteristic of the highly sensitive person, present in approximately 15 to 20% of the population. These people have an increased ability to notice subtleties, process information more deeply, are more easily stimulated, and have more intense emotional responses. In evolutionary terms, this heightened sensitivity may be a valuable adaptation, allowing greater caution and a richer perception of the environment. But in the artificial context of large human crowds, this same trait can become a disadvantage. When a highly conscious person enters a crowded party, they do not experience just the music and conversations, but also pick up microfacial expressions, subtle changes in tone of voice, unspoken interpersonal tensions, and countless other signals that go unnoticed by many. It is like trying to watch dozens of movies simultaneously, each one telling a complex emotional story. The result is often a feeling of exhaustion and overload that others may not understand. Why are you so tired? We just went to a party. This misunderstanding increases isolation, creating a cycle of social withdrawal. Modern technology has dramatically intensified this problem. Our parties are now not only physical gatherings, but also arenas of digital performance. Every moment is potentially photographed, filmed, shared online, commented on, and eternalized. The constant presence of smartphones means we are never really just here, but always partially there on some invisible digital stage. This additional layer of social complexity demands even more cognitive and emotional resources, especially for those already predisposed to heightened self-awareness. But there is something even deeper happening beyond mere sensory overload or digital performance pressure. The withdrawal of conscious people from hyper-stimulating environments reveals a fundamental truth about the nature of authentic human connection that our society desperately tries to ignore. In our consumer culture, we have been conditioned to believe that more is better in almost every aspect of life. More friends, more connections, more experiences, more stimuli. Social networks reinforce this mentality, rewarding the quantity of connections over their quality. The algorithms that govern these platforms favor content that triggers fast and intense emotional reactions, not deep reflection or genuine bonding. In contrast to this dominant model, people who consistently seek solitude or more limited and deeper social interactions are consciously or unconsciously resisting a powerful cultural narrative. They intuit that true human connection is not scalable. It requires full attention, authentic presence, and mutual vulnerability, qualities that inevitably dilute in mass environments. The more people present in an interaction, the more superficial it tends to be. This is not an elitist criticism of casual socialization, but simply an observation about human cognitive and emotional limits. In pre-industrial societies, people often lived their entire lives in small communities where the depth of relationships compensated for their limited number. A medieval peasant might know only a few dozen people, but knew them intimately, through countless interactions over decades. Today, we may interact superficially with thousands of people throughout life, but rarely develop the kind of deep knowledge that was common in earlier eras. We gained breadth, but lost depth. When we observe contemplative cultures around the world, from Buddhist monks to Christian mystics, from Stoic philosophers to yoga practitioners, we find a recurring theme: the value of deliberate solitude as a path to self-knowledge and wisdom. These traditions do not promote pathological isolation, but rather a balance between social engagement and reflective withdrawal. They recognize that certain truths can only be accessed when we temporarily step away from social noise and create space to hear our inner voice. This ancient wisdom is being rediscovered by modern neuroscience, which demonstrates how periods of disengagement are essential for memory consolidation, emotional processing, and creativity. Maybe what we are interpreting as social phobia or introversion is in many cases an intuitive form of psychic self-preservation. People who regularly flee socially dense environments may be protecting their mental integrity and capacity for authentic connection in a world that constantly threatens to fragment our attention and dilute our interactions. Their behavior does not represent a flaw to be corrected, but a healthy adaptation to an increasingly artificial and unbalanced social environment. The real irony is that many of the people who avoid crowded parties and socially stimulating environments are often the most capable of forming deep and meaningful connections in more appropriate contexts. Their withdrawal does not reflect a lack of interest in others, but rather a desire for higher quality interactions. They prefer an intimate conversation with a close friend to dozens of superficial exchanges with acquaintances. They prefer to truly listen to one person rather than partially hear many. This preference is not a social deficit, but a conscious choice to prioritize depth over breadth. I need to pause for a moment and ask you directly, in what moments of your life do you feel this tension between the cultural imperative of constant socialization and your inner desire for deeper and more meaningful connections? Have you ever felt that peculiar exhaustion after a social event, not just physical, but existential, as if something essential had been drained from you? I know that many of us carry this experience in silence, perhaps for fear of seeming antisocial or inadequate, in a world that celebrates extroversion and perpetual connectivity. But your experiences are valid and probably shared by more people than you imagine. Share in the comments. I feel the need to move away from crowds when. Your voice may help create a space where we can honestly discuss this fundamental tension in our modern social lives. A particularly revealing example of this dynamic can be observed in the behavior of many of the greatest thinkers, artists, and innovators in history. People like Isaac Newton, Emily Dickinson, Marcel Proust, Nikola Tesla, and more recently figures like Bill Gates and J.K. Rowling all demonstrated tendencies towards social withdrawal and a preference for solitude during significant periods of their lives. It is no coincidence that profound contributions to human knowledge often emerge from minds that value deliberate isolation. Genuine creativity and original thinking require distance from consensual narratives and prevailing social expectations. It is hard to hear your own voice when you are constantly immersed in the voices of others. Historical perspective helps us understand another aspect of this issue: the relationship between elevated consciousness and sensitivity to social context. In pre-modern societies, the role of the shaman, oracle, or prophet was often assigned to individuals who demonstrated increased sensitivity to social and environmental dynamics. These people perceived patterns and connections that others did not notice, often withdrawing from the community for periods of contemplation before returning with valuable insights. In a certain sense, the highly conscious person who withdraws from socially dense environments is participating in an ancient human tradition of contemplative retreat. When we examine non-Western cultures, we often find a more nuanced understanding of the need for solitude. In Chinese Taoist philosophy, the concept of Wu Wei, or non-action, emphasizes the importance of periods of stillness and disengagement to achieve harmony. In Japanese culture, the term ma describes the empty space between objects, pauses in music, or moments of silence in conversation, all valued as essential elements of aesthetic and social experience. These traditions recognize that meaning does not reside only in presence and action, but also in absence and withdrawal. The pressure to socialize constantly and comfortably in large groups is a relatively recent phenomenon, closely linked to the rise of modern consumerism and the attention economy. Parties, nightclubs, mass concerts, and other high-stimulation social environments are also spaces of intense consumption. Alcohol, food, fashion, entertainment, all are sold more efficiently when people are in states of high social excitement and reduced judgment. It is no coincidence that corporations invest billions in marketing that associates their products with high-energy social experiences. The person who regularly chooses not to participate in these environments is also implicitly resisting a powerful mechanism of consumption induction, the tendency to pathologize the desire for solitude or limited social interaction serves specific economic interests. A person satisfied with a quiet afternoon reading a book, walking in nature, or speaking intimately with a close friend consumes less than someone constantly chasing new, stimulating social experiences in commercial environments. The medicalization of traits such as introversion or heightened sensory sensitivity turns natural preferences into conditions to be treated, often with profitable pharmaceutical products. I am not suggesting a deliberate conspiracy, but rather that our economic system naturally favors and amplifies behaviors that generate more consumption. But perhaps the deepest and most disturbing aspect of this issue is how our modern society systematically devalues the very introspection needed to develop self-awareness. From childhood, we are trained to keep our attention externally oriented on the next test, the next game, the next social achievement. Children who show tendencies towards silent contemplation or solitary play are often considered problematic, needing more socialization. Our educational system, designed in the industrial era, rewards conformity and extroverted engagement over deep reflection. Our professional performance evaluations emphasize interpersonal skills and teamwork over contemplative capacity or original insight. The result is a culture that produces externally oriented individuals, highly responsive to social cues and external expectations, but often disconnected from their deepest inner truths. We excel at navigating complex social dynamics, but struggle to answer fundamental questions like, what really matters to me? Or what kind of life do I truly want? This outward orientation creates a particular vulnerability to social and commercial manipulation. When our sense of identity and worth is primarily anchored in external validation, we become ideal consumers, always seeking the next product, experience, or social affirmation that promises to fill the internal void. People who regularly seek solitude and limit their exposure to socially dense environments are, in a sense, performing an act of political resistance, even if they do not conceive of it in those terms. They are affirming the value of inner life in an economy that monetizes external attention. They are prioritizing self-awareness in a culture that encourages constant distraction. They are choosing depth in a system that rewards breadth. By making these choices, they implicitly challenge some of the fundamental premises of our contemporary social organization. The true tragedy is that many highly conscious people internalize the dominant view that pathologizes their natural behavior. They see themselves as socially deficient, anxious, or inadequate because they do not enjoy environments that most people seem to appreciate. They feel guilty for needing time alone after social interactions. They question their worth because their connection needs differ from the model promoted by the dominant culture. This internalization of external judgment causes unnecessary suffering and prevents them from recognizing the inherent wisdom of their natural orientation. The truth is that different neurobiological constitutions require different social environments in order to flourish. Just as some plants thrive in direct sunlight while others require partial shade, some humans develop better in high stimulation social environments while others need more quiet and limited interaction. Neither pattern is inherently superior or healthier. Each represents an adaptive strategy with specific advantages and disadvantages depending on the context. Historically, successful human communities integrated diverse personality types, benefiting from the talents of those oriented toward broad social coordination, as well as the contributions of those inclined toward observation, reflection, and deep specialization. Extroverted hunters worked alongside introspective toolmakers. Socially skillful leaders collaborated with observant healers, each contributing uniquely to collective well-being. This cognitive and temperamental diversity was a critical adaptive advantage for our species. The problem arises when a society begins to disproportionately value one type of orientation over others. When the cultural ideal becomes the always connected networker, always available, always performing, we lose the unique benefits that emerge from more contemplative and introverted minds. We artificially reduce the cognitive diversity that has been central to human creativity and resilience. A revealing parallel can be found in agriculture. For centuries, farmers cultivated diverse crop varieties adapted to specific local conditions. This agricultural biodiversity provided resilience against pests, disease, and climate change. In the 20th century, however, industrial agriculture began favoring monocultures of standardized high-yield varieties. These monocultures are efficient by certain narrow metrics, but extremely vulnerable to unforeseen threats. Likewise, a culture that promotes a narrow model of social behavior and human cognition may seem efficient for certain short-term economic goals, but loses the resilience that comes from cognitive and behavioral diversity. Looking to the future, we can imagine a society that recognizes and values the innate diversity of human temperaments. Such a society would create spaces for high-energy social interaction and spaces for quiet contemplation without implicitly privileging one over the other. It would recognize that different types of contributions emerge from different conditions, and that collective wisdom requires both vibrant social engagement and deep solitary reflection. In such a society, no one would feel inadequate for preferring an intimate conversation with a close friend over a loud party. No one would be diagnosed with a disorder for needing recovery after intense social interaction. No one would be pressured to perform a type of sociability that drains their energy and compromises their authenticity. Instead, each person would be encouraged to discover and honor their own natural pattern of social engagement and solitary contemplation, recognizing that this pattern is not a flaw, but an expression of their singular humanity. This vision is not merely utopian, but pragmatically necessary. As we move into an era of advanced artificial intelligence and widespread automation, uniquely human contributions become increasingly centered on qualities that emerge from our inner life: original creativity, ethical judgment, contemplative wisdom, and authentic emotional connection. Ironically, the very qualities often cultivated by those who regularly withdraw from social tumult are the ones that may become most valuable in our collective future. Perhaps we should therefore reconsider our understanding of elevated consciousness and the social behavior associated with it. What if avoiding large crowds is not a deficit to be corrected or an anxiety to be overcome, but an intelligent adaptive strategy for certain minds in certain contexts? What if the person who consistently prefers more limited and deeper interactions is intuitively protecting a valuable cognitive and emotional capacity, increasingly rare in our hyper-connected world? This does not mean romanticizing extreme isolation or pathological social withdrawal, which can certainly indicate real suffering. But it suggests that we should be much more cautious about pathologizing preferences for limited socialization, especially when these arise naturally and do not cause significant suffering to the person. The line between legitimate mental disorder and simple neurological diversity is often determined more by arbitrary cultural norms than by objective science. The real challenge, both individually and collectively, is to develop discernment about which forms and quantities of social interaction genuinely nourish us, energize us, and expand our awareness versus which drain us, fragment us, and reduce our presence. This discernment requires honest self-reflection and a willingness to question prevailing social expectations. It requires courage to set boundaries that protect our mental and emotional integrity in a world that constantly seeks to capture and monetize our attention. If you often find yourself overwhelmed in socially dense environments, if you regularly need time alone to process experiences and regain balance, if your most meaningful interactions typically happen in intimate conversations rather than large social events, know that these patterns do not reflect any fundamental deficiency. They are valid expressions of a natural variation in human experience with deep roots in our biology, psychology, and even ancient spiritual traditions. Your desire for depth over breadth, for quality over quantity in human connections is not something to be overcome, but a wisdom to be honored. In fact, as our society becomes more saturated with information, more dominated by technology-mediated interactions, and more oriented toward constant external performance, the ability to withdraw deliberately, to stay in touch with one's inner voice, and to cultivate full presence in direct human interactions becomes not just a personal preference, but an act of preserving one's own humanity. If these reflections touched something you have been feeling, but perhaps hadn't found words to express, know that you are not alone. By subscribing to the channel, you will connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the philosophical challenges of our time. Each week, we meet here to explore together the great questions that define our era and to seek not only understanding, but also wiser ways of living amid the transformations we are witnessing. This is not just a channel, but a space of dialogue and collective growth. Join us on this ongoing journey. Subscribe so we can continue this essential conversation about how to live with more wisdom and purpose in a world that often leaves us disoriented and divided. As we move forward into the digital age, with its dazzling promises and subtle dangers, we will increasingly need spaces where we can honestly explore the complexity of being human in this unique historical moment. Spaces where not everything needs to be optimized, monetized, or performed for an audience. Spaces that honor both our need for connection and our need for contemplation. Spaces that recognize that true wisdom emerges not only from constant engagement with the external world, but also from the attentive stillness that allows us to hear the whispers of our own consciousness. Perhaps, in the end, the conscious person who regularly steps away from crowds and seeks more limited and deeper interactions is not fleeing reality, but moving toward a more authentic one. A reality not defined primarily by external approval or conformity with social expectations, but by fidelity to one's essential nature and to the kinds of connection that truly nourish the soul. In this sense, their withdrawal does not represent a failure to adapt to the modern world, but a successful adaptation that preserves what is most valuable in the human experience: even when external conditions do not naturally favor it. This may be, after all, the hidden truth revealed by the behavior of those who consistently avoid socially dense environments, that genuine human consciousness in all its depth and subtlety requires specific conditions to flourish, that our minds are not infinitely adaptable machines capable of thriving in any environment, but delicate ecologies that depend on careful balances between stimulation and reflection, connection and contemplation, engagement and withdrawal. And that honoring these balances, even when it means swimming against the dominant cultural current, is not just a matter of personal preference, but of existential integrity.
I go to therapy every week. I have a weekly session. People can wonder, why do people need to go to therapy? The subject matter in therapy is myself. Who knows myself better than me? Why do I need to go to some stranger to learn about myself? This is ridiculous. But it's not. Because yes, I know more about myself than any other person perhaps, but there are so many things I don't want to know about myself. I have access to all the data, to the memories, to the daily events, but I reject some things I really like to know about myself, but the more painful, the darker episodes in my life, the more painful things I do in the present, it's very difficult for a person to acknowledge that about oneself. If you're in a relationship and there is a problem in a relationship, you ask and people would say, I'm perfect. It's the other person who is causing all the problem. If only the other person changed a little, behaved differently, everything would be perfect. And you ask the other person, they would say exactly the same thing. I'm perfect. It's my husband, it's my wife that is causing all the problem in our household. So this is why I need to go to therapy, to get professional help, to realize some very deep truths about yourself that are too difficult or too painful to acknowledge. History is like therapy for entire civilizations or for the whole of humankind. Also, entire nations often don't want to acknowledge dark episodes in their past or dark things they are doing right now. Entire civilizations, the same. You ask, and almost every nation, almost every country would say, we are perfect. All the problems are because of the other nations. All the problems are because of the other civilizations, of the other cultures. I think the responsible job of historians to simply help people understand better the big processes and the deep sources of the problems in the world. And this is a big responsibility.
The thing is that not in a dictatorship, in a democracy, newspapers and other news outlets are liable for their decisions. Like if the editor of the New York Times decides to publish some conspiracy theory or fake news at the front page of the New York Times, he cannot hide or she cannot hide behind the argument, but free speech, there are some people who believe it's true, so I put it on the front page of the New York Times. No, your job as editor is not just to put something random there or something that would please people. Your job is to fact check and to take responsibility for these decisions and to make sure that if you publish something on the front page of the New York Times, you better be sure that this is accurate and this is responsible. And if you don't know how to do it, then you're in the wrong job.
Hi, everybody. So I'm very excited to be back here. Last time I was here, I was talking about my own book with Sam Altman, who did an excellent job, a little frightening how good he was as an interviewer for my book. But I'm very excited. I've interviewed Yuval, I think several times. But I'm super excited that he wrote a book about AI, really. But it's actually about the history of information, because he's a historian by trade. And so I'm super excited to talk about that. I'm thrilled you're all here. You missed the vice presidential debate. It's probably a good thing. This is much more interesting. And we won't be talking about eating dogs, so that's good. We're already way ahead. And I'm very excited. He needs no introduction. What an amazing man, what an amazing author. And this book is sure to be another bestseller. Yuval, come out, Yuval Harari. Great. So we have a lot of questions, and then we'll get to questions from the audience at the end. We can't see you very well right now, so apologies if I don't, but we will bring up the lights when you ask questions. But I've got a bunch of them. This is actually going to be put on with Kara Swisher on the podcast, it should be really interesting and a great discussion. So welcome to City Arts and Lectures. It's great to see you again, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you. It's really good to be here with you.
So we're here to talk about your latest book, Nexus, a brief history of information networks from the Stone Age to AI. It's not brief. It's quite a large and long book.
From the Stone Age to AI in 400 pages, it's quite brief.
Oh, all right. Okay, fine. Okay, all right. Okay, if you say so. Your first bestseller, Sapiens, obviously, A Brief History of Humankind. I like to use brief all the time. Came out in 2011. And honestly, these books could kill a small dog, speaking of dogs. And then you wrote Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow in 2015. Yeah. And again, despite the titles are not so brief. So let's talk about what you were trying to do with Nexus and how it relates to these other books that you wrote and why you decided to do this. And then we're going to get into history first.
So, it picks up where I left off with Sapiens and with Homo Deus. Mm-hmm. The two main questions at the basis of the book is, first of all, if humans are so smart, why are we so stupid? Mm-hmm. We've managed to take over this planet, to reach the moon, to split the atom, to decipher DNA, and here we are on the verge of destroying ourselves and much of the ecological system with us in several different ways. Could be ecological collapse, could be nuclear war, could be the rise of AI. Mm-hmm. So what's wrong with us? Mm-hmm. And this is a question that has bothered people throughout history. And you have a lot of answers in mythologies and theologies that tells us that there is something wrong with us. Mm-hmm. There is something wrong with human nature. Mm-hmm. And Nexus takes a different view. The problem is not in our nature. The problem is in our information. Mm-hmm. If you give good people bad information, they will make bad decisions and self-destructive decisions. And then the book goes on to explore the long-term history of information. Why isn't information getting better? Mm-hmm. You would have expected that over thousands of years, our information will get better, and it really doesn't. Large-scale modern societies are as susceptible to mass delusion and really insanity, like mass insanity, as Stone Age tribes. If you think about the 20th century with Stalinism and Nazism, far more powerful, of course, than Stone Age tribes, a lot more sophisticated information technology, but still can be extremely delusional. And when you look at the world today, we have the most sophisticated information technology in history, and people are unable to hold a rational conversation anymore.
There's a technology term for that, which is very technical, which is garbage in, garbage out, right? And I think it explains quite a bit of it in a really kind of very easy, simple way. But the point you're making is this is historical. This is a historical thing. It's just more sophisticated in the garbage that we're making for ourselves, correct?
But the garbage is not accidental, and it's effective in one important thing. It's effective in creating order. And one of the key ideas of the book is that humans control the world because we can cooperate in larger numbers than any other animals. And to create a large-scale cooperative system, you need two things which pull you in different directions. You need to know some truth about the world, but you also need to preserve order between large numbers of people, thousands, millions, billions. And the truth is not the easiest way to do it. In most cases, fiction and fantasy and downright lies are more effective in creating order among people.
So one of the things that I think about a lot today, and we'll get into this in a minute, I want to get to history first, is the idea that technology and information is either a tool or a weapon. Technology used, whether it's the printing press, whether it's papyrus, it's both used as both, and it will always be used as a weapon no matter what happens in every historical. A spear is always a weapon, but a knife is a better example. It's a tool and a weapon. Obviously, AI is very hot right now, but in Homo Deus, you discuss the benefits and dangers of new information technology, especially if humans lose control. And you write in Nexus that since Homo Deus, your conversations about AI have gone from being idle philosophical speculations to having, quote, focused intensity of an emergency room. What is that conversation right now, from your perspective?
About AI? Mm-hmm. I mean, there are two conversations. One is simply understanding what we are facing. What is AI? Why is it dangerous? What is the threat? And a lot of people have difficulty grasping it. It's not like nuclear weapons.
Right.
That the danger was obvious, and nuclear war, which will just kill everybody. What's the danger in AI? And Hollywood, I think, did us a big service in focusing attention on that issue long before anybody
Absolutely,
else thought about
fiction,
it. But it focused on the wrong scenario. Mm-hmm. If you think about the Terminator or the Matrix, the focus is on the big robot rebellion.
Right.
The moment the AIs decide to take over the world and wipe us out. And this is unlikely to happen anytime soon because AI doesn't have the kind of broad intelligence necessary to build a robot army and take over a country or the whole world. Mm-hmm. And this makes people feel complacent. And I think one of the key issues in the conversation about AI is to explain that it's not about the big robot rebellion, it's more about the AI bureaucrats. Mm-hmm. It will take the world from within and not by rebelling from outside or from below. I mean, AI, yes, it's not a general intelligence, but it doesn't need to be. Within a bureaucracy, you need a very kind of narrow intelligence to gain enormous power. Mm-hmm. If you think about a lawyer, for instance, as an example, if you drop a lawyer in the middle of the savannah, he or she are not particularly powerful entities. Mm-hmm. They are much weaker than a lion or an elephant or a hyena. Mm-hmm. But within a bureaucracy, a lawyer could be more powerful than all the lions of the world put together.
Right.
And this is where AI is stepping in. We now have millions of AI bureaucrats increasingly making important decisions about us, about the world. You apply to a bank to get a loan, it's an AI deciding. Mm-hmm. You apply for a job. In wars, increasingly, it's AIs choosing the targets. Mm-hmm. So one part of the conversation is to understand what is the threat, and we can explore that. The other part of the conversation is, of course, what to do about it. And here I think, almost everybody after a certain amount of time agreed that the best thing would be to simply slow down. Give human societies...
Not everybody agrees that. No, not everybody does.
Because of an argument that I'll get to immediately. They will say, ideally, yes, it would be good to slow down because it would give human society time to adapt, but we can't slow down, we can't afford to slow down because then the bad guys, our competitors here or across the ocean, they will not slow down and they will win the race, so we must run faster. Mm-hmm. And then you have this kind of paradox that basically they are telling us we have to run faster because we can't trust the humans, but we think we'll be able to trust the AIs.
Right, exactly. And, you and I had this discussion with Daniel Kahneman, the late Daniel Kahneman, about the decision-making of AI versus decision-making of humans. I don't know if you remember that. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that's I think is interesting to explore at the beginning, though, is the historical, what's happened historically with much lesser information systems that humans construct. So the tacit assumption of this information age is what we call, I think all ages have been information ages in a lot of ways. As you said, that more information will lead to the truth, which will lead to more wisdom, more openness, a better world. Obviously, that's naive, and you discuss that. And you define the information instead as something that creates new realities by connecting different points of view into a network. Talk a little bit about that, because this concept is standard in mathematics, right? But as a philosopher, do you see any, and historian, do you see any danger in separating information from truth?
Most information is not truth. The truth is a very small subset of all information in the world. The truth is, first of all, it's costly. If you want to write a truthful account of anything, you need to research, you need to gather evidence, to fact check, to analyze. That's very costly in terms of time and money and effort. Fiction is very cheap. You just write the first things that comes to your mind. The truth is also often very complicated because reality is complicated. Whereas fiction can be made as simple as you would like it to be, and people prefer, usually, simple stories. And finally, the truth can be painful. Whether the truth about us personally, my relationships, what I've done to other people, to myself, or entire nations or cultures. Whereas fiction, you can make it as attractive, as flattering as you would like it to be. So in this competition between truth and fiction and fantasy, truth is at a huge disadvantage. If you just flood the world with information...
Which was the point of a lot of people. Yeah.
Most information will not be the truth. And in this ocean of information, if you don't give the truth some help, some edge, the truth tends to sink to the bottom, not rise to the top.
Right.
And we see it again and again throughout history, every time people invent a new information technology.
So it's really interesting because I was just reading Rachel Maddow's prequel where she talks about Joseph Goebbels talking about this. Like if you flood the zone with bad information or just anything, it washes out the truth. And of course, Tennessee Williams said the truth is at the bottom of bottomless well. You can never get to it. And someone more modern, Steve Bannon. I read Steve Bannon. I'm sorry, I do it for the rest of you. But he talks about it incessantly, the idea of flooding the zone, because that's the best way to confuse and distract people and it's used everywhere, including years ago in Circuit City, which was just an electronics retailer. When I walked in, there was a bunch of TVs, and they were all going. And I said, why is that doing it? And the person goes, oh, it's the wall of confusion. And I was like, what? He goes, we want you to buy a certain television set, so we want to upset and confuse you and then make you wander through a racetrack situation, and then you'll buy the TV we want.
Oh.
Which, I know, right? It was brilliant in a way. But as you said, it's not a new thing. So we're used to equating new technology with scientific progress, this virtuous circle, like the case of the printing press. And this was a really interesting part of your book. So let's go a little bit in history. You noted that when the press was invented, instead of science, such as Copernicus's On the Revolutions of the Heavenly Spheres, one of the founding documents of science, of the scientific tradition, you wrote the real bestseller of the 15th century was a book called The Hammer of Witches.
Yeah.
Talk a little about The Hammer of Witches.
Okay.
It was a bestseller.
Huge bestseller.
Yeah.
Huge bestseller. So basically, especially in a place like this, in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, you talk with people about information, they will eventually reach out to history to give you some historical analogies. And they will tell you something like the same way that the printing press caused the scientific revolution, so what we are doing will create a new scientific revolution.
Right.
And the thing is, the printing press did not cause the scientific revolution.
No.
You have about 200 years from the time that Gutenberg brings print technology to Europe in the middle of the 15th century until the flowering of the scientific revolution with Newton and Leibniz and all these people in the middle of the 17th century. During these 200 years, you have the worst wave of wars of religion in European history.
Because of the printing.
Again, the printing press enabled it in a way I'll explain in a moment, and also the worst wave of witch hunt. The big European witch hunt craze is not a medieval phenomenon. It's a modern phenomenon that was helped along by the printing press. Medieval Europeans didn't worry much about witches. They thought they existed, but they didn't think that they were dangerous.
Right.
Then around the time that Gutenberg comes with the press, you have a small group of people that comes up with this conspiracy theory that witches are not individuals with magical powers that can brew love potions and help you find lost treasure. There is a global conspiracy led by Satan with agents in every town and every village that wants to destroy humanity.
So QAnon is what you're talking about.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a direct line.
Yeah.
There is a direct line. I mean, the ideas are coming from there. And at first, nobody paid it much attention. Then there was one of the people who popularized it was a man called Heinrich Kramer. He started a do-it-yourself witch hunt in the Alps, what is today Austria. And, but he was stopped by the church authorities who thought he was crazy and expelled.
Yes.
And he took revenge through the printing press. He wrote this book, The Hammer of the Witches, Malleus Maleficarum, which was, again, a do-it-yourself manual to how to identify and kill witches. And many of the ideas we still associate today with witches, for instance, that witches are mostly women, that they engage in wild sexual orgies, this came, to a large extent, from the deranged imagination of Heinrich Kramer. Now, just to give you a taste of this book, there is an entire section in the book about the ability of witches to steal penises from men. With all kinds of evidence, it's all evidence-based. I heard from some people that, so for instance, he brings a story, evidence, of a man who wakes up one morning to find out that his penis is gone. And so he suspects the local witch. He goes to the house of the local witch and forces her to bring him back his penis. And the witch says, okay, climb this tree. And he climbs the tree. And at the top of the tree, he finds a bird's nest where the witch keeps all the penises she stole from different men. And she says, okay, you can take your own. And the man, of course, takes the biggest one. And the witch tells him, no, you can't take this one. This belongs to the parish priest.
Oh, okay, good. Good for him.
Now, you can understand why this book sold a few more copies than Copernicus's on the revolution of the heavens.
I don't think there's penises in that. No.
And now this all sounds very, very funny.
But it
until you realize the consequences. Tens of thousands of people were killed
Mostly
in the most horrendous way during the European witch hunt craze. And to give just one example to balance the funny story about the penises. So in Munich, they arrested an entire family, the Pappenheimer family, accusing them of being part of this global conspiracy of witches. And it's a father, mother, 3 kids, and they start by torturing the 10-year-old boy, the youngest of the family. And you can still read the protocol of the interrogation in the archives in Munich today. And they torture a 10-year-old boy in unspeakable ways until he incriminates his mother. He admits, yes, she's a witch. She went to meet Satan. She kills babies. She summons hailstorm. And they break the whole family. And they execute all of them, including the 10-year-old boy. And, this eventually also reaches to America, the Salem witch hunts. And this was, this was fueled. It was not caused by, of course, but it's not that the printing press caused it, but the printing press enabled it to spread. For the same reason that fake news and conspiracy theories spread today.
And then the people that create the printing presses don't take responsibility for it in modern day.
Yeah,
I've been in that conversation.
And the thing is, that conversation happened centuries ago. And today you again have millions of Americans basically believing in the same story about a global conspiracy led by Satan. To destroy civilization. And if you look, what stopped it last time? How did we, in the end, get to the scientific revolution? It wasn't the technology of the printing press. It was the creation of institutions that were dedicating to sifting through this kind of ocean of information and all these stories about witches and so forth, and developing mechanisms to evaluate reliable information.
And to be trusted by the population, correct? Which is very easily fooled.
And to spread not the information people are most likely to buy, but the information which is most likely to be true. You know, when you send a manuscript to a scientific publisher to be published as a paper or as a book, so they want to know not only if will this sell a lot of books or a lot of
But is
copies.
this true?
Is it true?
Right.
What kind
Which
of
I think
evidence
is,
do you have?
you know, one of the things that's happened, if you fast forward to today, and I want to ask a couple more historical things, because it happens again and again, this constant narrative of lying, essentially, that people tend to believe, was when I had an interview with Mark Zuckerberg where we were talking about Alex Jones, who is one of the greatest purveyors of misinformation, a totally heinous character in our modern history. And I was like, why don't you take him off the platform? He's clearly lying, and it's not true, and these kids weren't child actors, and they're actually dead, and it's damaging to the parents, it's damaging to everyone. And for some reason, he switched the conversation to Holocaust deniers when we did this interview, and I was like, oh, what a mistake on your part, but fine, we'll go to Holocaust deniers. I was like, no, let's stay with Alex Jones, but he did it, and I went along. And he started to talk about that Holocaust deniers don't mean to lie. And I felt that was the definition of Holocaust. I was like, wow. And I let him spin it out, which was really interesting to hear his point of view, which was completely ridiculous. Because I felt that the more Holocaust deniers are on the platform, the more anti-Semitism down the river would happen. Like you could see it happening if these people had access to other people, because it's interesting stuff, right? It's much more interesting than the facts. And you know, he got in a lot of trouble for saying that, and et cetera, but it didn't prevent him from continuing to allow them to thrive on the platform until 2 years later when he decided to kick them off. He decided. One person was responsible, as far as I was concerned, for this flood of anti-Semitism because he refused to do anything at the beginning. So talk a little bit about, from a historical sense, where those... Because right now it's in the hands of just a few people, and they have real problems with history. They have real problems with knowledge beyond coding.
Yeah, I think the main issue...
And for some reason they all have penises, but go ahead.
So they're afraid the witches will steal them.
No, that's just Elon. Nobody wants your penis, Elon. Well...
So how do you go
So
from there?
you talk about self-correcting. You talk about the importance of self-correcting mechanisms. That's what you call it.
Yeah, I think, again, the key point about all these issues is not whether people are allowed to say these things.
Yeah.
Because here, I would tend to actually agree with Zuckerberg, with Elon Musk, with others. We should be very careful before we start simply silencing people. You cannot say that at all.
Well, let me make a point. They do silence when they feel like it.
Yes.
So you're aware. It's a lot of hypocrisy.
I know.
Okay.
But I think, again, when it comes to really censoring, there is a discussion to be had.
Right.
The problem is not with people saying all kinds of things. Mm-hmm. The problem is with the platforms deliberately promoting particular kinds of things that spread hate and fear and anger and outrage. It's at some point, even Elon Musk said it's not freedom of speech, it's freedom of reach.
No, he didn't say it. He copied it from someone. But go ahead. It was said years before.
He was willing to repeat it.
Sure.
But the thing is that people produce an enormous amount of content all the time.
Right.
And the question is, what gets attention? What gets spread? Mm-hmm. And here, the responsibility of somebody who manages a big platform, a media information system, whether it's a printing shop or whether it's a social media outlet, is to be very careful about what they choose to spread, what they choose to promote. And if they don't know how to tell the difference between facts and lies, they are in the wrong business. I mean, this is, for instance, what was built during the scientific revolution, is exactly these mechanisms.
Right.
How do we tell the difference between facts and fiction?
So how do we build those today when this is in the hands of some very troubled people, like with the full control of these things, or either uneducated or I don't know what they're doing, actually. It's some incompetence, some arrogance, some narcissism. It's in the hands of a very small amount of people who, most of whom know better, and it's in the architecture of this stuff. To me, it's the architecture, because when you look at, say, a Google, it's designed for speed, what you're looking for if you search for whatever, speed, context, and accuracy. Like, I'm searching for ADL, I'm going to get ADL. This is an example I always use. That's a utility, right? It comes to you. What social networks are designed for is virality, speed, and engagement. Which is a different architecture altogether, and it always leads the bad direction. So how do you create, what should influence our thinking? Because the government refuses to step in. We'll get to that in a minute.
First of all, it should be clear that the platforms should be liable for the actions of their algorithms, not for the content of the users.
Yep.
And if somebody posts a hate-filled conspiracy online, that's the responsibility of that human being.
Right.
But then, if the Facebook algorithm or the TikTok algorithm decides to promote that conspiracy theory, to recommend it, to autoplay it, this is no longer on the user. This is the action of the algorithm, and this is the main problem. And I mean, it's amazing to think about it, but one of the first jobs to be automated in the world was not taxi drivers and was not textile workers, it was editors, news editors. I mean, this used to be one of the most powerful positions in society. If you edit a major news platform, a newspaper, you're one of the most important people because you shape the public conversation.
Sure.
And we saw throughout history how much power editors had. Like during the French Revolution, Jean-Paul Marat shaped the course of the French Revolution by editing maybe the most important newspaper of Paris, of France, in those times, L'Ami du Peuple. Lenin, before he was dictator of the Soviet Union, his one job basically was editor of a newspaper, Iskra. Mussolini was editor of the newspaper Avanti. This is how he rose to fame and then became dictator of Italy. So like the ladder of promotion was like journalist, editor, dictator. And now the job...
I haven't reached the top one yet, but go ahead.
Because you're in the wrong period, you're in the wrong era.
Shoot. Oh, well.
I mean, now the job that was once done by Lenin and Mussolini is done by algorithms. It's one of the first jobs in the world to be completely automated. And it's still, of course, the humans are still in control. They give the algorithms the goal. And as I guess most people here know, the goal given was increased user engagement.
Right.
And the algorithms, by trial and error, discovered that the easiest way to increase user engagement is spread outrage.
Yeah.
And this is what they did. And they should be liable for that. Again, not for the content of their users.
So the idea you're talking about is, the way I boiled it down was enragement equals engagement. You know, that's the way it does, because it works. Joy also works, but it works less well than enragement, right? So which is why you get cat videos and QAnon, right? That's, essentially the two things. But one of the things, so speaking of the hammer of witches, actually, before we get to that, talk a little about what happened, in the most famous version of propaganda, which is still probably Nazi Germany, in terms of using the media, using imagery, using propaganda. Because I think we use the word misinformation or disinformation when we're really talking about propaganda in the end.
But it's all part of the same kind of toolkit. Because a key difference between dictatorships and democracies is that democracies work on trust, and especially trust in institutions, whereas dictatorships work on terror. So dictators, they don't really need you to believe in a particular theory, in a particular version of reality. They really need you to disbelieve everything. If they can destroy all trust between people, then the only system that can still function is a dictatorship. So, and we see it also today, and we saw it, of course, in Nazi Germany, in the Soviet Union. I mean, there is, with one hand, they try to spread a particular conspiracy theory, a particular propaganda. But with the other hand, they just try to sow distrust. And unfortunately, both historically and also today, this is not the preserve, say, of Nazis or fascists of the extreme right. We see it on the right and on the left as well. It was also something very common on the Marxist left. That and the key idea, maybe the most important idea, which is common here, is the idea that the only reality is power, and that all human relations are power struggles. This is an idea which is common on both the extreme right and the extreme left, which is corrosive of trust. It implies that all human institutions, whether it's the media, whether it's science, whether it's the courts, they are just elite conspiracies to gain power. Whenever somebody tells you something, the question to ask is not, is it the truth? The question to ask is, whose privileges does it serve?
Right.
It's obviously not the truth, because nobody cares about the truth. All humans care only about power. So every time somebody says something, the only question is, who is gaining in power by this?
Speaking of that in the Hammer of Witches, for example, the New York Times fact-checked over 170 posts recently from Elon Musk, who owns a big communications platform now, along with the other stuff he should still be doing and not this, on X in a week, and he found that almost 1/3 were false, misleading, or missing context. His posts coincided with harassment campaigns on election officials, so basically he's using it's not a public square, it's a private square owned by the world's richest man, to burn people in his own way. So what do you think about that? How do you assess social media at the moment in its ability to self-correct? Why would it, if one rich person who has somehow lost the narrative has the ability to do this in so many ways?
So first, let's
leaving Trump aside.
Yeah, let's explain what self-correction is.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at information networks and at institutions throughout history, so a key difference is whether they have strong or weak self-correcting mechanisms. A self-correcting mechanism is something within the institution itself that constantly works to identify, to expose the mistakes of the institution or of the member of the institution and correct them. So some institutions have only weak self-correcting mechanisms. In dictatorships, they are almost non-existent. Like in Putin's Russia, there is no mechanism to identify and correct Putin's mistakes.
Well, there's no mechanism, just recently when Elon tweeted about assassination of Kamala Harris. He was like, well, it was funny to my employees, and so I thought it was funny. Which is sort of like your employees have to laugh at what you say. It felt like the same thing. So how do you, this summer the Supreme Court sidestepped whether social media should or should not, away from Musk, should or should not moderate content. Public opinion is split because of at least in this country, because of the First Amendment, and they always get mushed in there in a way that's very deceptive, I think. Conservatives think they're doing too much, progressives think too little, and proponents of less content moderation often, as I said, cite the First Amendment, but I don't think it's about free speech. It's about, as you said, algorithms. I'm going to read a bit from your book. You wrote, the information network has become so complicated, it relies to such an extent on an opaque algorithmic decisions in intercomputer entities that it has become very difficult for humans to answer even the most basic of political questions. Why are we fighting each other? So talk about the impact of these unfathomable algorithms that are owned by individual people who direct them in some fashion or control them.
But there is a big question here, whether the danger is the individuals who own them, or whether the danger potentially is the algorithms themselves. And I agree that at the present moment, the people who own the technology probably pose the bigger danger. But in the long term, we have to take into account that this is the first technology in history which can potentially make decisions and invent new ideas by itself.
Right.
That AIs are agents and not tools, and therefore down the road, the main problem could be the AIs and not the human creators or the human owners.
Right, so that it becomes what it wants to do, correct?
Yeah, and like in the case of the social media algorithms, today they should know better, but at least in the beginning, the executives who gave the algorithms the task of increased user engagement, they did not anticipate what will happen. And I think that most of them definitely didn't want what happened. That the corrosion of trust and the collapse of the public conversation and the destabilization of democracy, this was not their plan.
Well, they certainly should have anticipated. It wasn't very hard to figure that out, correct? I mean, I was in a meeting with Facebook when they showed Facebook Live, and I said, oh, what happens when people murder each other on this thing? What happens when someone puts a GoPro on their head and does a mass murder? What happens when there's bullying, suicide? And literally the person there was like, you're a bummer, Kara Swisher. And I was like, yeah, I am. You know, like humanity has become sometimes a bummer. So how do you then self-correct that? Because the thrust of your book is about AI, and you say we're at a critical moment of canonization, that AIs will become full-fledged members of our information network. Let me read this section, because you're talking about the people are the problem now, but the algorithm itself will be, the AI algorithm
could become the main problem down the road.
Which makes you scared, because they're doing a bad job. Humans are doing a bad job right now. But in coming years, all information networks, from armies to religions, will gain millions of new AI members, which will process data very differently than humans do. The new members will make alien decisions and generate alien ideas. That is, decisions and ideas that are unlikely to occur to humans, which is a plus for AI, for a lot of people. The addition of so many alien members is bound to change the shape of armies, religions, markets, and nations. Entire political, economic, and social systems might collapse, and new ones will take their place. That's why AI should be a matter of utmost urgency, even to people who don't care about technology and who think the most important political questions concern the survival of democracy or their fair distribution of wealth. That sounds terrifying, because people are doing a terrifically bad job right now. So talk about, you were not an optimist when it comes to AI. You know, you're saying Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk are one thing, but boy, wait till you get a load of this AI kind of thing.
I mean, first of all, it's obvious that AI also has enormous positive potential.
Sure.
Otherwise, we would not be developing it.
Right. Well, there is the money, but go ahead.
Yeah. No, but even the money, I mean, you need to sell something. I mean, it does. I mean, in many cases, people buy it because there is benefit in it.
Right.
Otherwise, it's difficult to sell it. But the key thing is that human societies are extremely adaptable if we give them enough time. And this is just moving too fast. We don't have time to adapt, again, to these completely new financial systems, armies, religions, which will be created by all these new AI agents.
You call them alien and not artificial intelligence. Why is that?
They are alien, not in the sense of coming from outer space, of course.
Although I can't wait till they get here and fix everything, but go ahead. Right about now, guys, get down here.
It's because, you know, artificial intelligence conveys, I think, again, a complacent and wrong idea that these things are artifacts. And people, when they think of artifacts, they think we create them, so we can control them, we can anticipate them. And the most important characteristic of AI is that you cannot really anticipate it, because it learns and changes by itself. If a machine cannot learn and change by itself, it is not an AI. It is an automatic machine. If you think about, you know, a washing machine, a coffee machine, you have lots of automatic machines which are not AI. It's only AI if it can learn and change by itself, which means that it's going to be very difficult to anticipate and to control what it's going to do.
Even though it's fueled by our own information that we've been uploading the past 2 decades, correct?
Yes, I mean, it works. I mean, it eats all the information that humans have produced, not just in the last 2 decades, in the last tens of thousands of years. If you think about AIs that produce images, so we feed them with all the images created since the cave art of 40 and 50,000 years ago. And they eat the whole of it within just a few months and then start creating new things. At the first kind of generation, it's mostly similar to what humans have produced so far. But I guess that very quickly, they will start to become more and more creative, which also means more and more alien, more and more different from human creations. Now, we have been used to living, throughout history inside human culture. Like everything, all the images, all the poetry, all the financial systems, all the armies, they all came ultimately from the human imagination, from our mind. And suddenly, very quickly, we will find ourselves living inside a culture which is more and more an alien culture, coming out of the calculations and confabulations and imaginations of a non-organic entity.
Which was originally fed by us.
Which was originally fed by us, the same way that we eat the plants and we eat animals, and still we can create things that plants and animals can't.
Right.
It's like you go back 3 billion years or whatever, so you have these, the atmosphere of the Earth had almost no oxygen in it. Then you had these microorganisms that polluted the atmosphere with oxygen, and this killed almost all the organisms in the world. A few of them adapted to the oxygen, and we are their descendants. But eating all this oxygen, we can still do stuff that these microorganisms from 3 billion years ago couldn't anticipate and can't understand.
So why do you assume it wants to kill it? The idea is it doesn't want it. One of the things
it does what it does.
It does what it does, so we don't know what it'll do.
So again, to take something, think about the financial system. The financial system is a good example because it is the ideal playground for AIs. AIs have still a big difficulty with the messy, physical, biological world. This is why every year you have these promises that next year you have all the self-driving cars on the road, and it turned out to be much more difficult because you have to deal with traffic and humans and broken roads and dogs and whatever. So it's difficult. The financial system is easy. The financial system is only data. It's data in and data out. That's it. So this is kind of AIs, this is their ideal playground.
Right.
What happens if you give AIs more and more power to make decisions and also invent new stuff in the financial
that we
system.
hadn't thought of, right? Exactly. One of the things which is really interesting is that tech people are using a term agent, co-pilot, friend, assistant, like they're lesser than, essentially, than humans, and we are completely in charge. I just recently spoke with Microsoft AI CEO Mustafa Suleyman, and they have a new word at Microsoft called agentic, which is agent.
Agent.
It's not a word. I don't care. I think
it's a new word they invented.
Okay, fine, but it's not. And you're ringing the bell. Talk about what you think between the thinking of AI as a tool or agent, because that's what they're leaning in on. This is we're here to help you. And it reminds me of which I always say, the Twilight Zone episode, To Serve Man. It's a cookbook, right? Like that when they came, I don't know if you ever saw it, but you should. It's a cookbook. It's not here to serve man. It's to serve man with a side of potatoes, I guess. When you talk about this idea of agentic, you're talking about something very different because they're using companion, friend, everything.
An
agent your
agent
teacher,
is an entity that can make decisions by itself that you can't anticipate, and that can invent new ideas by itself that you can't anticipate, that can learn and change. So they had, for instance, this famous experiment that OpenAI did when they wanted to test GPT-4 before releasing it, and they gave it the task of solving CAPTCHA puzzles, and it couldn't solve the CAPTCHA puzzles, all these kind of strings of twisted words you need to identify.
Yeah, neither can I.
So they gave it access to the TaskRabbit online a web page where you can hire people to do things for you. And GPT-4 tried to hire a human to solve the CAPTCHA for it.
Makes
and
sense.
The interesting thing was the human got suspicious. The human worker on TaskRabbit wrote, "Why do you need help solving CAPTCHA? Are you a robot?" It directly asked, "Are you a robot?"
Wow,
and
humans for the win, TaskRabbit.
But what happened then is that GPT-4 answered, "No, I am not a robot. I have a vision impairment, which is why I can't solve the CAPTCHA, and I need your help." And the human, this sounds reasonable, and the human did it.
Right.
Now, nobody told GPT-4 to lie, And nobody told GPT-4 what lie would be most effective. This was a very effective lie. If it was just, this glorified autocomplete, let's just take a word from here and a word from there, you wouldn't come up with such an effective lie.
Right, so it's a good
So
liar.
this is an agent.
Right.
And, you scale up. And I'll give an example from what's happening in my home country now in Israel.
Right.
So there is a huge debate, I'm not sure who is correct there, about the role of AI in choosing bombing targets in Gaza. Like choosing, in the Terminator, you had the robots pulling the trigger.
Right.
But what's really happening in wars today, it's the humans pulling the trigger, but the AIs are calling the shots, literally calling the shots.
Right.
I mean, everybody that I talked with agree that at present, the AI has the capability of choosing targets,
Right.
and that it is being used to go over immense amounts of data
They are.
that no human analyst is
Ukraine
able
is happening
to
in
analyze
Ukraine, too.
and choose targets.
So is when you're because let me read you what Suleiman said. They use the word friend. They use the word companion. They're using these very lovely words for I guess the lonely humanity, but. And friend is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. He said, this is what he said to me, it's going to be your teacher, your medical advisor, your support network. Ultimately, it's going to take actions on your behalf. This is the friendly version of that. You're talking about a very unfriendly
Yeah, the
version.
target selector.
Right.
Now, again, there is a debate, and I don't know who is right, because I talked with a lot of people, and they tell you different things, and I read different reports and documents. One school of thought says that the AI goes over, again, enormous amounts of data that no human can analyze. This, and based on patterns in the data, says that a particular building, let's say it's Hamas headquarters, and says to the humans, bomb this building, and the humans just go ahead and bomb it.
Right.
Basically on the advice or orders of the AI. The other school of thought I've been talking to that says, no, it's not how it happens. The AI says this building is a Hamas headquarter, bomb it, and then we get the human analysts to go again over all the data.
That's the idea, whether it's radiology or that could iterate into anything.
Yes, but they all agree that the AI is key because the humans would never even think of looking at that building without the AI pointing at it.
Although you're talking about...
And this is still extremely primitive AI.
Right.
I mean, this kind of bombing AI and ChatGPT and GPT-4, this is like the amoebas of the AI world.
Right, which is what they talk about. But where do humans intercede? Because a lot of them argue to me, for example, if you said to AI, solve human hunger, right? Solve hunger around the world. The first thing it does, the first answer without the correct prompts is, we'll kill half the human race, that'll work. And that's what it will do. That was, because it makes sense, like that's what you should do, not find new crops, which it could also do. So doesn't it really depend? One of the things you had, let me read this, an AI agent in your phone has implications on a personal level. As you know, it's all in your phone, your new Apple Intelligence or whatever it's called. Right now, it just tries to rewrite emails for you, but which is irritating, because most of my emails are no and yes, and then it asks me if they want me to rewrite that, which is no, I don't. You write, the easiest way for AI to seize power is not by breaking out the Dr. Frankenstein's lab, but by ingratiating itself with some paranoid Tiberius.
Dictator, yeah.
I can think of one or two these days. What risks do you see? Talk about that, because you're talking about ingratiating
we tend to talk about AIs in the context of democracies, but dictatorships also have a huge problem with AIs. For dictators, for human dictators, the scariest thing in the world is not a democratic revolution. The scariest thing is a powerful subordinate that takes power from them, either assassinates them or manipulates them. If you think about the Roman Empire, for instance, this is the reference to Tiberius, not a single Roman emperor was ever toppled by a democratic revolution. But a very large percentage of them were either killed or toppled or manipulated by powerful subordinates. A general, a provincial governor, their wife, their son, somebody.
Right.
And this is still the number one problem for dictators around the world. And for them to give a lot of power to an AI that can then get out of their control is very, very tricky. Because, to seize power in a democracy, it's difficult because power is distributed between many organizations, institutions. How would the AI deal with the Senate filibuster? It's difficult. But to seize power in a dictatorship, you just need to learn how to manipulate a single, very paranoid individual. And paranoid people are usually the easiest to manipulate. So if you think...
Again, I know a few.
Yeah. So it's not just an issue for democracies. Also, dictatorships have problems. And, it starts with small things. Like if you release a chatbot to the Russian internet, how can Putin make sure that the chatbot will not tell jokes about him or criticize the invasion of Ukraine or say, call it a war, God forbid? Because in Russia, there is a law that this is not a war, this is a special military operation, and if somebody says that this is a war, they go to jail. Now, what do you do with chatbots? I mean, how do you terrorize a chatbot? Like, even if you prepare a perfectly kind of, the regime prepares its own chatbot and releases it to the Russian internet. But then the chatbot starts interacting with people, starts analyzing data, starts learning and changing. How can you prevent the chatbot from starting to say things against the regime?
So it's not good for dictatorships, but democracy, it also creates chaos. One of the selling points of the internet and social media was that it brought the world closer together. That was at the beginning, just so you're aware. Yes, we're all going to get along. If I had $1 for every time Mark Zuckerberg said community to me, I'd be very wealthy. But somehow it didn't turn out that way. You say right now diverging views on social media are actually leading to more separation, will get worse with AI. Talk about this, you called it the Silicon Curtain and data colonialism.
So this is about what might happen on the international level, not within countries, but between countries. So the two main scenarios is that you'll have the world splitting into completely different information spheres. After centuries of convergence and globalization, you will have completely, if the main metaphor in the early days of the web was the web that connects everything and community and so now the main metaphor is the cocoon. Like the web is closing in on us and we are enclosed within information cocoons and different people are inside different cocoons.
Right.
And the Silicon Curtain is, of course, a reference to the Iron Curtain and to the idea that we will have entire countries or entire spheres which are in completely separate information
Which
cocoons,
we have in this country right now.
which is developing at a very fast rate, and then a complete breakdown in communication and understanding between human beings. That you cannot agree on there is no longer a shared human reality. And the other main danger is of the rise of new digital empires and data colonialism. The same thing that happened in the 19th century with the Industrial Revolution. The few countries that industrialized first, they had then the power to conquer and dominate and exploit the rest of the world. This can happen again with AI technology.
But it doesn't have to be countries, it can be people, right?
It can be people inside the country, but I think the biggest worry is still on the international level. Some countries will become fabulously wealthy because of AI, and the US and China are the front runners here. But other countries could completely collapse. Their economy could completely collapse, and they will not have the resources to retrain the workforce, to rebuild, to adapt to the new AI economy. So we can have a repeat of the imperialist drive of the 19th century, and this time centered around data. To control a country from afar, you will no longer need to send in the soldiers and gunboats and machine guns. You will basically just need to take out the data.
Right.
If you have all the data of a country, you have all the data of every journalist, every politician, every military officer, and you also control the attention of the people in that country. You control what they see, what they hear. You don't need to send in the soldier.
Right.
This has become a data colony.
So before we go, we're going to get to questions in just a second. I want to talk about regulation. You've been advocating for AI regulation for a while, so have I. Last year you signed the open letter causing for a pause, which very nice, but it didn't happen, just FYI.
Nobody really expected it.
No, it did not. And they're, OpenAI is raising $150 billion. A valuation of $150 billion. They're raising $6 billion. Lots of people in Silicon Valley signed it and then started their own thing. I think of one or two people. You didn't. Here in California, Gavin Newsom recently vetoed a bill that would have been the first legislation in the nation to put up AI guardrails. It was a problematic bill. It was somewhat unspecific, but it required safety testing. It mandated a kill switch, turn off AI systems. And many who criticized it said it was focused too much on frontier models. And then Stanford professor Fei Li, who was one of the early AI people, also warned that it would disadvantage smaller developers. And they're trying to rewrite it, but there's almost no regulation anywhere, and there's no global regulation. There's some of banning bots, deep fakes people are talking about. What do you see as the regulatory scheme work here to do this? Because we haven't been able to do the last one.
Yeah.
Not one.
So I think that there are three things I can say. I mean, there are two regulations which should be obvious. One is that corporations should be liable for the actions of their algorithms. You developed it, you deployed it, you're liable, like with cars, like with medicines, like with
agree.
Food. The other is that you should ban counterfeit humans. AIs and bots are welcome to interact with us only if they identify as AIs.
So transparency.
Yes.
Right.
But, I mean, it's going to be impossible to just regulate AI in advance because, again, it's an agent, because it learns and changes very, very rapidly. The only thing that can work is to create living institutions, not kind of dead regulations that are written in books, but living institutions staffed by at least some of the best talent on the planet and with enough budget to understand what is happening and to react on the fly. And again, before we even get to regulation, the first step is observation. We need eyes before teeth. Like most people, even in this country, hardly understand what is happening and why is it dangerous. If you go to the rest of the world, to the countries which might end up as data colonies, they are even in a worse situation.
Right.
Because they have to rely on what the American or the Chinese companies or governments tell them. So what we need urgently is an international institution, again, with the best talent and with enough budget to simply tell people what is happening and what are the dangers. And now we can discuss what regulations...
Almost like a nuclear regulatory commission is kind of what you're talking about, right?
But again, with nukes, it was relatively easy to understand the danger.
Right.
With AI, it's a very rapidly developing
Because there's
technology.
positives to it. The Surgeon General talked about this. There's never been technology that's both positive and possibly devastating to humanity. So my last two questions. You say also that unsupervised algorithms should be banned from curating public debates.
Yeah, absolutely.
People do such a good job at it already.
I would trust the humans more than we have thousands of years of experience with humans. We don't have experience with AIs. I mean, in the tech world, I often hear the opposite argument. We have thousands of years of experience with humans. We know we can't trust them. The AIs, we don't know, so maybe they'll be good.
Yeah.
And that's a huge, huge gamble.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to finish on this. You write, you said the survival of democracies depends on their ability to regulate the information market, which we have not done at all. Like, at all.
Yeah.
Not one. I was just recently on a CNN debate with this guy who was a Trump spokesmodel, really, because he didn't know anything. I said, how many laws are regulating the internet and free speech? Because he was going on about free speech, and he goes, hundreds. And I said, 0, but you're close. you know. So you note the decisions we make in the coming years will determine whether summoning this alien intelligence proves to be a terminal error or the beginning of a hopeful new chapter of the evolution of life. You have it both ways there, I see. So before we go, what's your worst case scenario and what's your best case scenario?
Ooh, you know, the worst case scenario is that AI destroys not just human civilization, but, you know, the very light of consciousness. That AIs are
Just
highly
that?
intelligent, but they are non-conscious entities, at least so far.
Right.
And we could have a scenario that they take over, these non-organic, highly intelligent entities take over the planet, even spread from this planet to the rest of the galaxy, but it's a completely dark universe. That consciousness, I mean, the ability to feel things like love and hate and pain and pleasure, this could be completely gone. So this is like, it's not a very high probability, but there is some probability.
So we'll call that the Thanos version, but go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And
That's the worst case scenario.
okay, what's the best one?
The best case scenario is that we are able to harness the immense positive potential of AI, you know, in healthcare, in solving climate change, in education. And the key is knowing which problems to solve. One of the key problems of humanity throughout history, and you see it in particular in Silicon Valley, is that we rush to solve problems, we do a tremendous job, and then we realize we solved the wrong problem because we did not spend enough time on just understanding what the problem is. And, you know, we now have this fabulous technology to say unimportant things to people we don't care about, and we still don't know how to say the most important things to the people we most love, we most care about. So it happens again and again in history.
Right.
That and we are so wise when it comes to, you know, finding the technical solutions, but we just don't spend enough time on choosing the right problems to solve.
Right, absolutely. You don't use emojis then, I guess. No. You ever heard of Genmojis?
Of what?
Genmojis.
No.
This is an Apple thing. You can generate any emoji you want.
Oh,
So-
like a face.
Anything.
Okay.
You just describe it and the emoji's generated. All right, we're going to get to questions from the audience. Think about your Genmoji, what you want to make, and waste your time doing that. Well, the machines take over and kill us, I guess. That's where we're going. Are you a positive person or a negative person? What would you say?
I try to be a realist.
Right. Well, you're a historian. As a historian,
I'm a historian, yeah.
As a historian, are you positive or negative?
You know, I know a lot of terrible things that humans have done.
Yeah.
But I also am familiar with a lot of very good things that humans have done. I mean, we've managed to shift from a situation when we can only trust, say, 50 other people in the band, like this small hunter-gatherer band, to a situation when we can now trust, to some extent, hundreds of millions and even of billions of people in a country or all over the world. I mean, the food we eat, almost all of it is grown and produced by complete strangers on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
So this is really remarkable.
Yeah.
So it's not only bad news. Again, in this discussion, who should you trust more, the AIs or the humans? I think, yes, we have thousands of years of experience with humans, and we've actually made some significant progress in building trust between humans. So this is why I think we are still better gamble on the humans and not on the AIs.
Okay. All right. So questions from the audience. We'll talk about a couple of them. All right. I guess you put your hand out. Is that correct? Are you guys? Where's the people with the?
Hello. We have a question from the balcony on your right.
Okay. It's hard to see, but go ahead.
Hi, thanks for coming. I really enjoyed Sapiens, and there was one particular part that gave me pause, if I could read it. It's, you say, cognitive dissonance is often considered a failure of the human psyche. In fact, it is a vital asset. Had people been unable to hold contradictory beliefs and values, it probably would have been impossible to establish and maintain any human culture. So I agreed with almost everything in Sapiens, and this one idea, it just completely flabbergasted me. It's the exact opposite of what I believe. And I was wondering, this was written a while ago, I was wondering if the political experience, especially in this country, has, if you've update your opinion, or if you could elaborate. Thanks so
Great
much.
question.
So just to explain the idea that the reality is so complicated that to come up with a theory, a model that just explains everything in a perfect way is impossible for humans. So if you look at any culture, if you look at any ideology, any religion, there are always these contradictions inside them. And if we could not, to some extent, live with the contradictions, we could not have cultures and ideologies and religions and financial systems and states and so forth. The question is, what do we do with them? And I think the positive side is to acknowledge these contradictions and use them as fuel to think further, to explore further. What is really dangerous, I find, is the kind of fanaticism that sees only half of reality, or only half of you shut down half your brain or one eye, and you just don't acknowledge part of reality because of the inability to deal with the cognitive dissonance. Mm-hmm. And this usually leads to the greatest crimes in history. It's not a matter of, it could be secular ideologies like communism, it could be religious ideologies, if you have some kind, if you're comfortable with exploring the cognitive dissonance, I think you'll be okay. But if you go in the kind of fanatical direction, I'll just have this one idea, one key unlocks all the problems in the world, this tends to be the most dangerous.
Okay, next question.
This question is all the way to your right in the orchestra.
Okay, right here. Got it. I see you.
Hello. I have a question. So you talked a lot about technology companies, regulation, specific people. Could you talk a little bit more about the individual responsibility? So the analogy that I have in my mind, so information is like food. It's very easy for people who are obese, who drive the car every day, get the bad food, to blame the government, blame the regulations, the quality of the food. Mm-hmm. While the answer there is, of course, in regulation, but there is something that individuals have to do to complement that.
Sure.
And in the public discourse, there is not so much information about what we as individuals need to, how do we live with this going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, the only thing, can I say, there are no regulations. So it's not, we're either getting tainted meat or not. And so in life, that doesn't happen. That's just one thing, is we don't get signals from the government.
Not enough. I mean, first of all, again, the number one responsibility is not on the individuals. I mean, these are extremely powerful and complex systems, and we shouldn't play, it's like with climate change, that yes, each individual should do their part, but ultimately it's a trick by the big corporations to kind of shift the blame and do a kind of guilt game. Oh, everybody is guilty, and you go home and feel guilty for what you did and leave us out of it. So the number one responsibility is first on the government and on the big corporations. But of course, individuals have the responsibility, at least in their own life, and I really like the analogy with food. And I basically, agree that everybody should go on an information diet. That the same way that with food, a century ago, food was scarce, people would eat whatever they could get, and especially if lots of sugar and fat in it, that's good, lots of energy. Now food in many places around the world is super abundant. You have all this industrially produced junk food, which is deliberately pumped full of fat and sugar and salt to make it addictive. And people have, at least many of us have understood this is not good for us, and we need an information diet, and we need a food diet. And it's the same with information. Once it was scarce, we consumed anything we could get, the only book in the village. Now it's super abundant. You have all this junk information around. So the idea that more information is always good for you, this is nonsense. We need time to digest information, and we need time also to detoxify the mind from all the junk information that we put in there.
It's also addictive and necessary. It's two things at once. It's designed to be addictive by the people who designed it and the algorithms, and then it's also, you can't live without it because you can't do your job. So you can't put it down ever.
Yeah, again, I'm not saying completely cut yourself off,
Right.
but each person in their life should think about what is my information diet and how could I improve it, both in terms of quantity, and for most people it means consuming less information. And again, consuming less information and going on an information fast every now and then means I have more time to digest and to detoxify the information I already consumed, and also be more mindful about the type of information that you put inside your mind.
Right.
So absolutely.
Okay. Time for, I think, 2 more questions. Where is the person?
This next question comes from the balcony in the center.
Okay. All right, right there. I see you.
Thank you. I read about the vacillation in capabilities between platform AIs and individually controlled AIs that might even run on a gaming computer, say.
Mm-hmm.
What's that going to look like moving forward if individuals or affiliation groups can control their own agents? And what are the implications? Will it just amplify their tribal, they'll incentivize it to say, give me QAnon?
Mm-hmm.
Or will they, and what would it look like to say, give me the truth?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, with regard to give me the truth, the expectation that AI will give us the truth is unlikely to be realized. Again, because most information is not the truth. AI is simply likely to create. It won't tell us the truth about this world. It will create a new and much more complicated and much more difficult to understand world. And again, I know that immigration is on the mind of a lot of people in the United States and other countries around the world today. And people are worried we'll have all these immigrants in, and they will take some of the jobs, and they will have all these kind of different ideas about how to do things. How can we manage? How can society manage? So whatever you think about human immigration, this is a good model to think about the AI revolution. What we are talking about is the immigration of millions and maybe billions of agents into society, taking up a lot of jobs, and they will not necessarily start with, again, the taxi drivers. They may start with the editors and the bankers and the screenwriters and the producers.
That's exactly where they're starting.
They will take the kind of most important jobs first, or the generals in the army, and they will have different ideas about how to manage society, and some of them could become your friends. One thing we haven't discussed is this new abilities of AIs to fake intimacy with people. I mean, if previously the big issue with social media was the battle for attention, you had these algorithms very capable in grabbing human attention. The new generation of AIs, they can go far beyond attention, they can go to intimacy. For the first time in history, it would be possible to create mass intimacy, which is a contradictory idea, which was never possible before. You know, like Hitler's propaganda machine, it was good at attention. You could force every German family to listen on the radio to the speech by the great leader, but this did not create intimacy. Now with the new generation of AI, you could mass produce intimacy. So maybe some of your best friends will be AIs. And they will influence the way you think. And again, before we even get to the discussion, optimism, pessimism, is it good, is it bad, it's just radically different from anything
and
we've
we have
seen
to
before
understand
in
what
history.
it could do. Okay. One more question. I'd like it to be a woman, please. 3 guys, that's enough. I have 3 sons. Love them, but I love my daughter too. So let's have a woman.
This question is all the way in the back, middle of
All
the
right.
orchestra.
Okay, as long as it's a lady.
I'm sorry, I'm a man.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be rude, but we only have a few minutes.
Yeah,
Apologies.
let's give it to a woman.
Where? I apologize. I'm just going to overrule you. So,
That's okay.
okay, over here, wherever you can find, whoever's doing the picking is going to have to talk
I'm
to
gonna
me
go over there.
afterwards. Okay, thank you. Again, I have 3 sons, love them, but it's time for my daughter. Go.
Wow, thank you. Okay, I wrote this down because I'm a little shy about this. Would you agree that Europe has a lower tolerance for fake news and holds media professionals to a higher standard than the US, who is often criticized for the systemic spread of misinformation? If so, how do you think we can hold the media accountable and combat misinformation? Should there be rules that prevent certain news outlets from labeling themselves as news if they don't adhere to specific standards? Shouldn't there be requirements such as you're not allowed to tell more than 5% of verified BS?
Well, that would be great.
Yeah. So definitely, I mean, part of what is happening is the erasure of borders between, the private space and public space. People don't know if what they say, they are saying it in private or in public. Similarly, the erasure of the border between news and entertainment. And, if you want to be a news channel, you have to live up to certain standards. And if you don't want to, then just define yourself as entertainment. But as long as people understand what they are consuming. And we don't have that. With regard to Europe and the US, it's not my expertise, I'm not sure. But I would say that, I hear a lot of people say that Europe has too many regulations, and this is bad for business. This is bad for the development of the technology. So how would it help you if you have all the regulations, but all the companies are elsewhere? So you're self-destructing. This is what they often tell to the Europeans. And I think this is inaccurate, because regulation and safety is not bad for business. If you want to put a car on the road, people want a safe car. If you have good safety regulations, this is not bad for the business of car production. If you think about, the COVID and the vaccines. So if you have a choice between a Russian vaccine and a German vaccine, most people would go for the German vaccine.
Right.
Because there are a lot more regulations that you can trust in Germany about how you produce vaccines and medicines and so forth than in Russia. So in many areas, this kind of binary choice, you have to choose. Either you have regulations or you have an economy. This is just not true.
It is, absolutely. You're right, 100. But that's one of the biggest tropes of Silicon Valley. And with regards to media actually has regulations attached to it. They get sued. Look at what happened to Fox and Smartmatic. There is a price, and then the problem is there's no price. All right, I'm going to ask the last question. I'm sorry, we've got to go. They're telling me we have to go. But I have one more question. So with Sapiens, you became, like every tech bro was a fanboy of you, like crazy. I was like, have you talked to Yuval? Do you know what Yuval said? I'm like, no, I took an anthropology course in college, unlike you, so I did know a lot of this stuff. But they were thrilled, and you really did find a way to get them relatively educated, not very, about some stuff. So they loved you, like couldn't stop talking about you. You know that, right? They were your biggest fanboys. This is critical.
Yeah.
What are they saying about, they don't like me anymore, I mean, they never did, but what are they?
It's just out. We'll wait and see.
What do you think?
I think they will like it less than Sapiens, but again, I think maybe I'm less critical than you are of them. But I think many of them, not all of them.
You haven't met them yet, but go ahead.
I've met some of them, and many of them are really deeply concerned about it.
They are,
because they understand. I mean, they understand almost better than anybody else what they are creating, and they are very concerned. They don't know how to stop. Again, they have this basic argument that we would, most of them, not all of them, we would like to slow down. We realize it's dangerous. We would like to give human society more time to think about it, more time to develop the safety mechanisms, but we can't stop, we can't slow down. They will say, we are the good guys. If we slow down, the bad guys in the other company or in the other country will not slow down. And then the bad guys will win the race and take over the world, so we must do it first.
Right, but that's sort of the Xi or me argument that Mark Zuckerberg's often made. Like, it's either Xi or us, and I'm like, is that my choice? Is there another? Is there choice?
I mean, I think there are more choices, but I also think this is a serious argument. And again, I don't think they are kind of Hollywood science fiction villains, just Dr. Evil out to take over the world. So I think that they would appreciate, to some extent, a deep and meaningful conversation about it. They have their opinions, but I wouldn't write them off so quickly and so easily.
All right, on that note, Yuval Harari, it's a great book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's great.
Thank you.